Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Bike Shed, a podcast from your friends at thoughtbot about developing great software. I'm Sally Hall.
And I'm Aji Slater. Together, we're here to share a bit of what we've learned along the way.
So, Aji, what's new in your world?
Well, for my wife's birthday, she has gotten me a workshop with one of the Great British Bake Off champions.
My God, that's amazing.
So a winner from a few seasons ago, Peter, is the youngest winner ever. He's going to teach me how to bake a celebration cake, which I love on multiple levels. That I'm getting to do this workshop as I'm like getting more into baking in this country that loves baking, and there's so much more baking process and materials availability than I'm used to, even just at the local grocery store. But not only do I get this experience, and I'm going to get to ask a bunch of questions and increase my skills and everything, but that this was her birthday present for herself was a cake that I will have made at the end of this
You will then make a delicious cake for her.
Yeah, exactly. And so
has she put in requests for like flavor or decoration themes or anything?
Like I know what her preferences might be, but it's so vague as to what the coursework is going to be. No, we haven't. We're trying to go in without any expectations because I don't know how much like leeway there's going to be in the recipes that we're learning or anything like that. But yeah, I'm very excited. I am finding baking is one of these places where I'm learning to love the like process of learning and getting better at a thing. And so much right now we are as a society so focused on like the output, and we're kind of skipping over the middle step, that it's a fun place to try and fail and learn and experiment and get to do that middle thing, which with baking a lot of the time is waiting. It's waiting for yeast to burp. And
that's the thing I love about the Bake Off show is that they show that part. They show people just sitting around waiting. That is a real part of baking.
Episodes and episodes worth of just sitting on a stool drinking tea or staring at an oven, because sometimes that's the reality of it. So I'll be doing that this weekend.
I'm very impressed that she did that as her, like, that is an amazing way to know what you want for yourself and make it happen. So kudos to Mina. Very impressed.
Absolutely.
Not surprised.
No, not at all. No.
Very on brand for her.
What's new in your world?
Well, I also have been making things. I spent last weekend, it was a holiday weekend here in the US, so I had 3 days, and woke up on Saturday morning determined that I was going to build a porch swing, which is something that I've been wanting to do since we moved into this house about 2 years ago. And there's a place on the porch where there obviously used to be a porch swing, but there's not anymore. And I've seen and loved, I used to live in Charleston, South Carolina, which is a very specific culture, very beachy. And there's like, it's really common to see like bed swings, which is basically a porch swing with like a bed mattress on it. So it's like the size of usually a twin bed. And it's just like, and they're usually pretty low to the ground and just like a really cozy place to hang out. And so we saved a twin mattress when we upgraded our kids' beds. And I spent last weekend assembling a porch swing. I only went to 3 different hardware stores for a total of like 5 or 6 trips, because you never get everything you need the first trip.
No, absolutely not. 5 or 6 seems low. Well done.
Yeah. Broke 2 of my wife's power tools, but fixed one. And have a porch swing. We haven't hung it up yet. And I also ordered fabric to make a cover for the mattress that will be waterproof. But I'm very, very excited about that. And that's something that's been on when we bought this house. I made a Trello board of house projects.
As you do.
And this card has been on the Trello board of house projects in the like to-do column for 2 years. And I am so excited it's in the in progress column now, and soon it will be in the done column, and I cannot wait.
Wow. Have you done that kind of, I imagine there's carpentry. Is that something that's in your wheelhouse?
Yeah. I mean, it's more in my wife's wheelhouse than mine, but my dad was a builder his whole life, so I grew up around tools and learning how to use tools. So awesome. It's not something I do often, but I like doing it and want to do more of it. But I built it entirely by myself, which I'm very proud of, but I did ask both my wife and my father about 1,000,000 questions during the process. And
Absolutely.
before we hang it up this weekend, I need my dad to come over and evaluate the sturdiness of the supports we have. Because I don't want to end up like breaking a leg on this thing when it crashes to the ground.
That would be a sad end to what so far has been a great story.
Yeah. So, and I've mostly been ignoring that house Trello board that we made 2 years ago. So I'm also excited to go back and be like, what other ideas did we have when we first moved in? And are any of them still good?
Right. I find lists like that. And most of the time, it's a lot of crossing off of things that are just not relevant anymore.
Yeah.
But it's still crossing off. There's certainly going to be
some of that. Yeah. Like I imagine there are some things on that list that I intended to do in my kids' rooms when we moved in, and they both leave for college in August, so those may not be relevant anymore.
Might have missed the window, yeah.
Yeah, I'll cross that off because you don't live here anymore? Whoops, sorry.
But also, hopefully, there'll be a few gems that you'll be able to start in on after the swing.
I'm hoping so.
Awesome. Yeah. That sounds great. Do you use work adjacent-y sort of things for managing life tasks often, like using this Trello board for projects?
Sometimes. With Trello, it's very like, sometimes I'll be using it regularly for personal stuff for a long time, and then sometimes I will, like in this case, forget that a Trello board even exists for 2 years and stumble back on it and go, oh, these are good ideas. I do love a spreadsheet. Pretty much any time I have to make any sort of decision that involves numbers, I'm gonna whip out a spreadsheet and use that, and that feels like a work tool. And I mean, Google Calendar runs my world.
Oh, of course,
if it does not exist on Google Calendar, it is not happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. How many calendars do you have within Google Calendar?
Ooh, that is a great question. And I'm actually going to open up Notion Calendar, which I use to coordinate across my Google calendars.
Sure.
So Notion Calendar, what it does is you can put a bunch of different calendars on there and you can sync them up so that an event on one calendar will block off another calendar, which I find enormously beneficial for work and personal stuff, but also for thoughtbot and client stuff.
Yes.
So like if I have a doctor's appointment, I just put it on my personal calendar, and then Notion blocks that time off on my thoughtbot calendar and my client calendar.
Okay.
So that I'm marked as busy without having to create 3 different events. And all of that. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
That sounds really great, actually. That is such a common frustration or friction when you're coordinating not only internal thoughtbot things, but sometimes you're like we'll have client laptops depending on different security needs and things like that, and so you'll have multiple accounts that don't always want to sync properly. And I think that's one of the biggest points of friction is syncing events across calendars. And so looking for a good solution for that, I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Calendar. For your question about how many calendars I have, my default view in my personal Google Calendar shows me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 calendars. But I have some other calendars that are like part of that just aren't on the default view.
Sure. Yeah.
So there's like my personal calendar, my work calendar. I co-parent my kids with my ex-husband, so we have a shared calendar for kid stuff. My wife and I have a shared calendar for things that are like relevant to both of us. That sometimes things just make more sense to go on the joint calendar than our individual ones.
Absolutely.
We have a meal plan calendar from the time when we meal planned, which will hopefully happen again.
Comes and goes.
Yeah. I have my wife's calendar. I have my kids' high school chorus calendar. I have the calendar from a church that we used to go to a lot and don't really go to anymore, but I can still see what's happening.
I have a very similar setup with calendars, and very much the same as you. If it's not on the calendar, it's not going to stay front of mind, because that's the kind of one place that I can keep up as a source of truth. And it's just always nearby and always checking on it. Not only because my ADHD time blindness is just making me terrified that I'm going to miss a meeting, even when I rely on other apps that are fantastic to remind me when scheduled things are coming up and are very good at that. The one hack that I've found that is maybe not the...
This is a safe space. You can share this.
is that I don't really keep an individual calendar. I put everything on the shared calendar and just put my name at the front of it, so that I am not the only person who is aware that I am supposed to be doing something. So
that's fair. My wife and I have shared our personal calendars with each other, so it kind of has the same effect.
Sure. Yeah. I don't have, I guess I've put a lot of trust into these systems, but not that much trust.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. For our international move and all of the visa application and all of the different work that went into that, we used Jira, actually.
Really?
We started with a Trello board, and it got a little bit more complex than Trello can handle.
It makes sense that moving across an ocean is more complicated than building a porch swing.
At times it was, yeah, absolutely. At times there was a lot of the waiting going on as well, though. But I usually prefer Trello because of the the simplified nature of it, that you don't have to deal with all the bells and whistles. But then when you need to kind of step up and reach for them, Jira helped us keep track of all of the open loops for that.
So it has never even occurred to me that I could make a personal Jira account.
Right.
Just the idea of that, I'm like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, of course you can do that. Of course you don't have to have an entire company in order to use this software, but it feels like you should.
I don't remember what the free tiers were, if it was just a limited trial or anything like that. So it's definitely not as welcoming in that way, because it is built and marketed as an enterprise kind of tool. But yeah, I'm glad it was there when we needed the extra features and depth that you can do there.
That's impressive. Yeah, I haven't gone that quite that far with using work tools personally.
Well, I'm interested now, what are some other tools that you find maybe for your personal workflow as opposed to on a project, or if there's something that you really tools that you've loved working with? What are some of the other things that you find yourself using on a daily basis to get things done at work?
Yeah. So I've been using Notion Calendar for a long time. I forgot to mention one of the best features for an ADHD person is that you can have it remind you 1 minute before a meeting, because I'm sure that you know that a 10 minutes before a meeting warning is just enough time to completely forget.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I like that. I've started using just the main Notion app, which I think there are tons of features that I haven't figured out yet, but I have been enjoying that as just sort of kind of a semi-unstructured place for me to throw thoughts into and then possibly organize later or not. Especially I've started using it for questions for clients. So, if I know we have a stand-up daily and I know that there's several things that I want to mention or ask about, and with different clients have different ways of working, and some of them, it's not always appropriate or useful to ask them the question when it comes to mind. So then I have to write it down and remember to ask it later.
Right.
And I found Notion very, very helpful for that.
Yeah, I haven't been able to keep up with a single notes application. And so my note system is still heavily air quotes around system. So I haven't quite found an app that I really love for that kind of thing just yet. But I definitely see the usefulness of that. Maybe I'll have to give Notion another look.
Yeah, I'm sure Notion pros would look at my Notion and be like, what are you doing? why are you using it this way? This is bad and wrong. But they're not invited to my Notion, so they can, yeah. And also, I'm not under any illusion that this is a long-term system for me. I don't do long-term systems other than calendars. Somehow that has stuck. But like any sort of note-taking or writing or to-do list system that I've ever used is temporary. It works as long as it works. And then at some point I become blind to it and don't pay attention to it or remember to use it or any of that anymore. And then it's just, time for a little bit of chaos until I find my next one.
Absolutely. Yeah. Same here. As we were kind of brainstorming the topic here of these applications that we use in our work, I was writing down a little list and what things I've touched on recently. And this one is so integral to the way that I interface with a computer now that I even forgot that this was like an extra app. This is the me computer interface, and that is Alfred.
Okay, the irony of you wearing that hat right now. Because if y'all aren't familiar with Alfred, at least back when it was the system that worked for me many years ago, the logo was a hat that looks very similar to your hat.
Yeah, it's a bowler hat, and this is a pork pie, so it's pretty close.
Yeah. Was that intentional? The hat?
No.
It's just that much part of who you are. That
it is. Yeah.
Oh, funny.
I've begun to notice that a lot of what I'm trying to sort of sand away the rough edges for me are kind of these little friction points that I find that a lot of other neurodivergent folks also are just much more aware of all of the tiny steps to get one thing done that, like, for many other folks is just one task, but it's just impossible to not see the 150 tasks that make up that one task. And so anything that can remove 20 of those small steps, even if it's just sometimes there are some days when my energy is running so low that shifting from keyboard to mouse, clicking, going back to keyboard is just it's a lot of decision fatigue. And it's saying it out loud, that seems...
Yeah, I can hear all of the neurotypical people rolling their eyes right now. That is very real.
Yeah, absolutely. And so having something like Alfred that can just be this much faster interface between my brain and it happening in the computer is really it's fundamental to the way that I work now. I use an app switcher. It will... it finds emojis for me. It will...
That's the secret to your very strong emoji game.
It is. Yeah, it is. And it will run shortcuts. It runs little scripts. I will put into it common things like logging into an application that I'm working on the login flow for. So it's something you need to do 20 times in half an hour. And so it will fire off a little shortcut that clicks the things that I need it to click, and just a lot of different personal workflow automation. That as soon as I've done a thing a couple of times, I try to find a way to throw it into some kind of Alfred workflow or some other kind of script that can be triggered from the one key that I have programmed to pop open Alfred on my screen.
What's a workflow that you've built in Alfred recently?
Well, my favorite, this isn't recently, and it doesn't get as much use, but my favorite workflow that I've ever built is a meme generator. A meme that will have, an image and impact font to put a couple of things. And because there's a meme for so many situations at work, that you can... I'm going to say it's an investment into team building. Is that weekend that I spent building this is I think it uses Imgur, or it uses one of the APIs where you can send it an API call with some JSON, and it'll send you an image URL back. So that takes individual programming of like what the fields are going to be, but I have a little workflow that will pop up. You can say what meme image you want, and then it has, through AppleScript, gives me a couple of dialog boxes that I type in the text that I want, and it fires it off, and I get it's right to my clipboard, and I just Command V it into where I'm going.
I'm just thinking about how much time I wasted in 2012 making exhibit Pimp My Ride memes that could have been faster with Alfred. I was weirdly very into that for a while.
If all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like an. If all you have is handsome Squidward, then everything's going to start to look like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to use Alfred in my pre-programmer life when I worked as a director of a coding bootcamp for a while, and it was so useful then. And I used it mostly for communication workflows. For I did a lot of snippets of text of like responding to various emails that I would just get the same email 40 times a week and need to respond to it the same way. But I haven't used it in my work as a developer, but just the like writing a flow to automate the login for a thing that you're building. So useful. I think I'm going to add that to my list that doesn't exist.
Fire up a new Trello board.
Yeah.
It's very easy wins to impress a lot of folks when you're running a demo in a weekly sync or something like that, and you just couple of keystrokes and it fills in the page instead of everyone watching you type out random text as you're trying to show off a feature. It's both really good, but then it's also sometimes a little distracting the first couple of times you do it. They're like, oh, what just happened there? And it's like, that's actually not important. I want to show you the feature.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Here's a tool that I use that I feel like tool is a strong word for it.
Okay.
But since we are so widely distributed at thoughtbot and work across so many time zones, one of the very small number of bookmarks that I have in my bookmark bar is everytimezone.com.
Yes.
It's customizable, so I can curate just the time zones that like people I work with are in. Oh. And then there's a little slider that you can move. So and it will show you like, okay, this time in this time zone, it's this time in all these other time zones. And I love it so much. I was one of the co-chairs of the DEI Council for a while, and finding a meeting time for people who like our time zones were literally spread from like Pacific time US to like somewhere in Central Europe. And we needed to find a time where we could all meet synchronously.
That is a large ask. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you actually introduced me to this application a while back, and it has become an indispensable tool in the tool belt. The UI for it, like you're saying, is just with that line down the middle that like you can drag around to update. It's so intuitive and so easily readable.
Yeah.
And now that I know it's customizable, like I've just never even tried. I've never like delved into it because
the default is so good.
The default is so good. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Highly recommend that one.
Another one that I use a lot that actually feels very similar to the things that Alfred can do for me as far as like reducing this sort of like minimal sheen of friction is it's called Home Row. And what Home Row does is on a keyboard shortcut, it pops up little flags over every interactable or interactive, clickable usually, or focusable element in my open application. And so a bunch of yellow flags will pop up on the screen and they'll have 2 letters in them, and I'll type those 2 letters and it will click that element. And so for a lot of just clicking around, I can do that just from my keyboard. And that it started out, I just used a browser extension called Vimium that gave kind of this almost Vim-like keyboard navigation experience for the browser. Then there was Shortcat, which worked for a little while, had some trouble with one of macOS's big architecture redesigns, and then struggled a bit. And then I found Home Row, and it's been working flawlessly for a little while, for quite a while now. And it's got a little added benefit that it's a tiny bit of a first pass accessibility checker as well. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm on a page or something like that and I hit Home Row and things light up on not just the application, but if it's the web browser, it'll be things in the page as well. And if there's something there that there's no little flag for, it's like, oh, that's going to be trouble for somebody to navigate to if they're not using a mouse as a pointing device. And so it's fantastic. It's another one of these things that can just, that little bit of like extra thought or extra whatever, it's shortening the distance between my brain and my computer's interface that I use all the time. And it's not quite as integral to my nervous system as Alfred is, but it's getting really close. The more I use it, the more it's there. I just absolutely love that.
Yeah, I like the way that you talk about it shortening the distance between your brain and now I forgot whatever it was that you said after that. That was really good. Because I think when people talk about tools for work like this, they're often thinking of them as like productivity hacks. How can I do this work faster? And like for me, and it sounds like for you, it's less about this is faster than moving my hand to my mouse and then moving my hand back. It's that it's less disruptive to my brain and thought process.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, I need to get as much done as I can in this time. It's that it is mentally exhausting for me to do some of these things, and offloading even the smallest thing like moving hands between keyboard and computer saves that mental energy and reserve for things that I actually want to use it on, like solving a problem or coming up with a new meme that is excellent.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that I use a vertical mouse because I get just RSI, and because it's a little bit taller, I'm constantly, every time I reach over to use the mouse, I'm knocking it off my desk. And
okay,
so,
I thought that was a me thing.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, just constantly. And so if I can lower the number of times that I even need to reach for the mouse, it's less time that I'm picking it up off the floor.
Oh man, that happens to me so often that I've never actually registered it as a thing that happens to me.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's just how you use a mouse. You knock it on the floor and then you pick it up.
It's true.
No,
it's true though.
No, there's another way to live.
I haven't found it.
Yes, you have. It's Home Row.
Oh, well, okay. Not with the mouse. It's
not with
to
the
leave the
mouse.
mouse. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Feel so seen.
Do you write workflows for Alfred and things like that for your personal stuff too, or is it mostly work focused?
Yeah, I think for the most part, like a majority of the stuff that I end up using these tools for is kind of agnostic to whether it's work or personal use of a computer. It's a little bit more, they're like interface tweaks than it is particular like automations or specific tasks. I know that I could probably be getting a lot more use out of it, like writing some one-off scripts and different things like that. And I certainly have in different times, but I think a lot of it is this, to drop into one of my favorite metaphors that Steve Jobs threw out, was that the computer should be the bicycle of the mind, and that it's going to be a machine that can like become an extension of yourself and like, increase your velocity or whatever. And I'm not sure that my idea of what velocity would mean in that would necessarily line up with his, but there's a immediacy that I have after spending years and years doing illustration and things like that with like pencil and writing or drawing implement, right? That it doesn't feel like there's a distance there, but there still feels like a distance between me and the computer, even after decades of, heavy computer use, that I'm always looking to kind of like shave a little of that away. And yeah, so it's a little bit kind of both is the answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the pencil never has an update that moves the button you always use to the other side of the screen.
That's true. And if it has, it's because I've bought the wrong pencil.
That's not a pencil. I hate to break it to you. Whatever that is, it's not a pencil.
That's a banana. Put that down.
Yeah, which is making me realize that, like, if you have an Alfred shortcut or something and an app updates and the UI is totally different, you can tweak your shortcut or workflow once instead of having to adjust to that change every time you interact with that application.
That's also true. Yeah. Kind of going along with those, if allow me to throw another one out there, is one that integrates really well with Alfred that I use a lot is Keyboard Maestro. And so Keyboard Maestro is sort of like a GUI for automating your computer's interface. And so it can like type things in, it can do clipboard fanciness, it can run JavaScript in the front browser window, and all of these different ways that you can kind of script or conduct your computer to do a lot of things after one little bit of kind of instruction or command from you. The thing that I use the most, or at least get the biggest kick out of, is it can find on screen and click based on an image. So you can take a tiny screenshot of something that you want to click, but isn't going to be either it's not accessible, or it might be in like wildly different places or different situations, but you know that this checkbox always pops up and it looks like this. Different things like that. Or it can find a certain color in a color picker that you want to keep going back to. I use things like that because I make Keynote do things for my talks that Keynote desperately does not want to do, but I will drive it within an inch of its life. And sometimes they take like 30 clicks to do this one thing. And so I will write a little automation that will do like 10 of those clicks for me. And being able to scan the screen, look for a little pixel, a little bundle of pixels, and click on it is super useful. And so Keyboard Maestro is the only thing that I've been able to find that can do something like that. You can't do that with AppleScript. So
that's amazing. And for something complicated like that you're not using every single day, I would forget. I would have to look up how to do that every single time.
Mm-hmm.
But if you make a workflow for it, then you don't have to try to keep all 30 of those clicks in your brain every time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely true. Anytime that I can kind of abstract away like steps of something that is like repetitive, or maybe like you're saying, not that I don't use very often, not very common, coming back to it and having it just work without having to go through figuring it out again. Yeah, absolutely.
That's very nice. Yeah, I feel like you've got more tools than me, so I want to hear more. Do you have more? Have we reached the end of your list? We've kind of reached the end of my list.
Okay.
Unless you want to talk about Post-it notes. I use Post-it notes.
Oh, I do want to talk about Post-it notes, but I'll hit you with one more. All right, we're going outside of apps at this point.
Yeah.
We're going into
just tools.
Yeah, tools. There you go. This is Stream Deck.
Okay.
And so Stream Deck it was originally made for streamers. I think, generally you think like video game streamers, like Twitch streamers, that sort of thing. It is a small box, essentially, with a bunch of buttons on it. And the neat hardware thing about this is they all have like a little screen on the buttons, but it's not actually individual screens in the button. It's one big screen and buttons that are transparent. And the software for Stream Deck splits it up. So it's a really nice hardware solution for having little individual programmable screens on buttons. And so I will sometimes trigger workflows or things off of that. If there are things that are going to be easier to remember with a little visual icon than remembering a shortcut that I've put into Alfred or something like that, I'll kick off an Alfred workflow with a button on the Stream Deck. It comes with a lot of plugins, it's got a plugin ecosystem basically of folks that have written their own like scripts and applications into it. I think there's even a Ruby gem that works with Stream Deck that I think is a little out of date now, but that was written by Aaron Patterson because he during lockdown wanted to find a new toy, and and of course he did. I wish I could share that, but I have a button on there that is the Slack icon that opens up with everybody that I communicate with on Slack regularly at work. And so there is a little Sally and a little Joelle button on there, and there's a little bike shed button to go to
you
our
have
panel.
A little button on your Stream Deck that you can press that will open up a Slack conversation with me?
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. You're just one little button right in the center of my desk away at all times. And so it's a little bit the same way. It's abstracting away even over the complexity of like remembering the couple of letter shortcut that I've written into an Alfred workflow, right? These things that either are uncommon or there are so many of them for one particular thing. There's so many different operations that it's just going to be a nightmare to try and remember all these different things. Like I learned Vim, my brain is full. Keyboard shortcuts.
I learned Vim, my brain is full.
and so being able to put like a little icon that's going to remind me what is going to do when I push this thing, it's more discoverable, and it's also just kind of fun.
It's just like a fancy easy button.
Yeah,
in those commercials.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
But I finally have found, after a lot of searching, someone finally wrote a good plugin for that for Google Meet, because it has been a nightmare. Because Google just moves buttons around
all the time,
and keeping something in sync with what Meet is doing is impossible. So I really appreciate all the work that this plugin developer has gone to. That it's a Stream Deck plugin and a browser extension, but I can finally just hit mute or video or hand or emoji react from my Stream Deck, and that's been really nice.
That does sound really nice. I bet they have one for Zoom too. I feel like I was on a project recently where we use Zoom a lot, and I discovered if you click the button to like raise your hand, I think the buttons move on the screen. So if you click in the same spot again to unraise your hand, what you actually click is opening up the AI assistant.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, a little shortcut button for that instead would be great.
Yeah. I think the things that are independent apps as opposed to like web pages are sometimes a lot easier for those things to work. So there definitely would be a Zoom plugin. So you should check it out. Tell me a little bit about Post-it notes before we...
Post-it notes. So I have Post-it notes of different colors that at any given time have a set of meanings to them. Okay. Meanings change over time, right? Mm. But, I have like blue for this is a thing I might want to blog about. Okay. Stick it on there. I have red for like this is a thing I need to remember to do. Mm. Because sometimes the only to-do list that will help is a giant red sticky note in the middle of my screen.
Yep.
And I have a couple other colors that don't currently mean anything right now, but it's so easy to start ignoring app notifications for me that sometimes having like a physical, tangible thing right in front of me is like the only way that I'm going to remember to do something or keep track of something. And the colors help me sort of organize that a little bit. And then there's the joy of crumpling it up and throwing it away when you're done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a joy that cannot be replicated in an app.
No, it cannot.
Yeah.
I've often wondered, and maybe the crumpling it up and throwing, is if there was some physical thing to do in the real world when you like merge a PR or something, like a little celebration. I wanted this when I was in an office with other humans, that we could like celebrate ourselves and each other together just by like, could we like ring a bell when we like fixed a bug or something like that? But nothing really ever settled. But I feel like that would scratch that same kind of itch of something physical to just.
I spontaneously had the best version of that ever one time. It was my first job as a developer, and it might have been like the first like production code that I wrote when I was merging it in. I was in like a corner of an office with like a sloped roof. So the roof was like right here, and there was a little hole in it that hadn't been patched yet. And I'm not making this up. As soon as I merged that PR, a squirrel popped its head out. I was like, oh my God, it's the real life Ship It squirrel.
That's amazing.
Right? So, like, you could train a squirrel to pop its head out every time you merge a PR.
You
have a dog that's almost the size of a squirrel.
This is true. Oh, but that also means her brain, it's not that big.
She didn't learn Vim, but it's still full.
Yeah. And good night, everybody.
Shall we wrap up?
Let's end it there. I don't think we're topping that.
No, I don't think so.